Hello, everyone. Welcome. So, welcome to our Codacy talk about leading your team to engineering excellence. My name is Eloisa. I'm here with the Codacy marketing team. Allow me to quickly introduce this talk while everyone joins. So, what are some challenges that come with managing an entire engineering team and their processes? How do we approach engineering metrics? How do we implement them? What are the benefits? What are some dangers? So we have a lot to discuss, and you can join in the discussion as well, always through the Q&A box. So it's going to be open anytime. And to answer all of these questions and more, we brought in a special guest speaker. So with me today is Steve Berczuk. He's a lead software engineer at a company called Riva Health. Steve is an expert in agile software development and has helped so many teams work together effectively. He is co-author of a book called Software Configuration Management Patterns. I'm going to link it here in the chat so you can explore on your own. But yeah, Steve is quite the writer. He is also a regular contributor to techwell.com. And you can also find some of his articles on his blog that I'm going to link here in the chat in a minute as well. And he's based in Boston. And I'm so happy that he's joining us today. Also with me is Stuart James. So Stuart is an engineering manager right here at Codacy. He's leading a team of software developers who are working on one of our solutions called Codacy Pulse. He's previously worked as an engineering manager and a tech lead in data engineering and as a senior engineer across multiple tech sectors. So thank you both for being here. Thank you everyone for joining. As you can see in the screen, by attending this webinar, you are already in sticking through to the end. You have a chance to win our giveaway prize of today, which is a massive Lego Millennium Falcon spaceship to add to your collection. So if you're the winner, I'm going to be in touch with you very soon. But anyways, what do we have planned? It's just very simple. I'm going to give the floor now to Steve and Stuart, and this is going to be more of a casual discussion. We want to approach a few questions about engineering, management, and performance, and then we'll take it over to you, people, through the Q&A. You can ask a question at any point. Just write it down in the Q&A box, and we'll get to them in order. So let's get started. I'm gonna stop sharing so we can really talk. Stuart, where do you think we should start?
Sorry, there we are. Hi, Steve. So why don't we start with what are some of the main challenges that you see in how engineering teams manage their processes currently, Steve?
Well, I mean, I think the way teams go wrong with metrics and best practices and things like that is they focus too much on the what. They see a number, they see an article that says this, we need to measure this, we need to do this, we need to do Scrum, so we need to do this process. And they don't necessarily focus enough on why they're doing it or what goal they're trying to achieve. I mean, this also happens, by the way, if you've done so, this also happens in product planning, right? That's the whole impetus behind the whole idea of user stories.
Yes.
So.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And why is this?
I mean, I think it has to do with, numbers are, I mean, I don't know whether it's an engineer thing, a manager thing, or just a people thing. Numbers are very concrete. Steps are very concrete. You can feel like you're making progress if you're doing something different. And doing different things and doing measurements actually can change your behavior and give you different outcomes. The trick is, not just blindly doing the thing or blindly applying the metric, because, at some point, even if your behavior has changed, is it changing in the right way? I mean, having the why gives you, two things. It gives you understanding of the problem. It also gives you a way to simplify the solution.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the same for process and practice. I've seen a few processes and practice imposed without really thinking about why are we doing this? What are the problems we're trying to solve? In one instance, it was an entire Scrum framework, and it resulted in a lot of resentment and a lot of questions, and a lot of changes again afterwards. So yeah, it's important to know why we choose the metrics and why and what problems we're trying to solve, and how we get alignment really to solve them problems. So how do we approach choosing the right metric, and how do we use those metrics?
I mean, well, this of course is a bit of an art, right? So that there's a lot, there's a couple of ways to do it. You can certainly do a lot of research and pick some, and figure out exactly what your problem is. And sometimes you do that and you're out of business before you fix anything. I mean, I think it's also perfectly legitimate to say, hey, this looks like it might help us. What's our problem? Is our problem, we're not meeting our sprint goals, for example. We're not getting and by meeting sprint goals, I don't necessarily mean the backlog has, whatever, 10 stories, 30 points, whatever. It's more, we have our product owners, our product managers are just unhappy with the output, or the business is unhappy. So what's, and then maybe work back from that and figure out what it could be. I mean, there's a bunch of, like the DORA metrics, the things your Pulse product does, for example, captures our clue.
Yes.
Yeah. So, picking one, and I think having a feedback process, I'm a big Agile person. I like retrospectives. I think a well-done retrospective gives you a lot of insight into where to go.
What about how can we avoid choosing the wrong metric, or something that leads to the wrong process or practice? I mean, for example, in the past, we've looked at measuring lines of code for productivity, or sprint velocity as performance. Sometimes when we choose metrics, we can choose them for the wrong reasons, and have the wrong outcomes. And they can be subverted as well. I mean, lines of code, it's quite easy to add a lot of comments. Cycle time, it's quite easy to make lots of very small tickets to subvert the metrics and make your team's metrics look great, when in fact we're just making it work.
In that case, lines of code, I mean, there are a couple of ways. I mean, first of all, I think there's certainly data that says lines of code isn't a great metric.
Yeah.
In my experience, and this is anecdotal, I mean, there may even be data here, I just don't know what it is. Getting rid of code is actually a measure of improvement. You've refactored, you've had fewer number of code lines removed could be a metric. But like I said, if that was your metric, you could just delete code and delete error handling and things like that you want. Yeah. I don't know if there's a way to, so there's certainly things that, you could look at and say aren't right, but I guess my general approach is to, in an Agile kind of iterative way, let's try this metric, see if it helps us. I mean, let's say you think lines of code is great because at your last company that did it and you managed to get stuff done, right? Hey, stakeholders aren't any happier than they were last sprint, and our lines of code per person went up. Mm-hmm. Maybe this isn't the right metric. So, I mean, so I think there's also as much as we're talking about metrics, which are very concrete and analytical, I feel like there has to be a more qualitative feedback loop. So metrics are a good input to a retrospective, for example. And
so giving a chance for example, for the engineering team to talk about the metrics and discuss if they're making an improvement, and iterating on it, keep discussing and going around the loop.
And there's context, right? Time. And I know this kind of maps to a specific DORA thing, but people implement it slightly differently. How long a pull request is open if you use pull requests. How time from commit to merge. In general, smaller is better. Maybe your goal is once a day or 20 minutes or an hour, but in context, right? Maybe you've blown that out of the water one site development cycle. Well, you actually had a big company offsite and everyone got together and so you really weren't developing, or somebody was sick but you reprioritized that work, or there was a production issue. So looking at the metric and saying, well, Stuart, you're messing up because you're not reviewing, or maybe it could even be a bigger cultural thing, or it could be a cultural thing why don't people review code? Well, because they have too many other things to do and code reviews aren't a priority.
Yeah.
But if you need to do them, your organizational values aren't aligning.
Yeah, yeah. And then if they do them, they may be neglecting something else. That might
Right.
even impact another metric you've chosen as a goal.
Right.
So I mean, how do we interpret metrics to improve? I mean, are there any dangers? Should we, I mean, we can become fixated by the number, or is it better to look at metrics longer term and seek consistency, predictability?
I mean, I think there's two aspects to that. There's, individual versus team metrics, which I think we might talk about later, but also, I mean, the metrics are always, like, many metrics are often an indirect indicator. Like I said, I think the value we talked about is not like, I mean, I don't think a customer or business owner or stakeholder honestly cares what your mean time to deploy is, or they might care about your failure rate, but you know what, as long as what gets to production that they're using isn't really causing any problems, they don't even care about that. I mean, but they're more like secondary indicators. So you have to come up with a measure, something, and is your customer happy is too fuzzy maybe, but some feedback loop, if you did a, you could probably even somewhat quantify that a little bit. Things like net promoter score kind of work, though those are very long range.
Yeah.
But like asking your product owner, hey, how do you feel? Is this good?
Yeah.
You can see where that trend goes.
Yeah. So this is kind of how you link it back to business then, and how you look at the business value.
I mean, that's what we're doing at the end of the day, right? I mean, I'm a bit of a process geek, and I like writing really nicely factored code and things like that. But like, there's a trade-off, right?
Yeah. Okay. So I mean, going on from that, what about the different tiers of metrics we have? Something like there's the business level tiers, the product level, and the team level. How do we think about those? How does this all link in? I mean, where should we focus? Should we focus on all of them, or do some of them matter more to us than others?
I mean, I think as an engineering team, I think that, we can probably focus on the team level and sort of delivery ones, and then, have a feedback loop where we loop them back to the customer.
Yeah.
It's, it's hard to be an expert on all of them. And I think if you're talking to business people, some product managers or some product owner types, people that skill set are very into like understand, are into like mixed panels, so they can look at customer engagement, and then they're also looking at GitHub and Jira and figure out how all those things tie together in their holistic way. Not everyone has that whole sweep. So I think you could, as an engineering team, you could focus more on the the code metrics, working with the product teams to maybe work on things like velocity. And I want to be careful. We talked about it before we started. We want to be careful about velocity as a metric, because there's so many ways you can skew that. I mean, I think at the end of the day is like, are people, is a company making them, getting are they giving them, this is going to sound very cliche, but the value to their customers? And, how do you measure value is another conversation. But, I think when you're doing math.
Yeah. So should we worry more about the business level metrics and the value than, say, the engineering team?
I mean, I think the business level metrics are, I think engineering teams should always, I think it's good for engineering teams to always work on being better, and whatever better is. If the business is happy, great, let's try to do things a little bit faster. Let's try to do things with a little more quality, whatever quality means. But, if the business says, hey, we're unhappy, how do you do that while also like, for example, if the business says you're unhappy, and that's a trade-off too, right? The business is unhappy because we're not getting the features done. And somebody says, well, if we skip testing, we get more work done. Well, that's not great, because what's going to happen is your customers are going to find your bugs, which is going to skew your long-term. But you could say, well, maybe we've been actually getting too excited about this new integration test framework. It actually does what we need, and we only need we have other tests to cover that, so we could still get our release out the door a little faster if we just run some smoke tests and then focus on unit tests. And then that's one option, but like, so tying, using the customer, customer unhappy, let's figure out where in the pipeline we can fix our problem.
Yeah, where the problem is. You could,
but engineer, and then as an engineering team, is we can always, I think engineers always, continuous improvements always a thing, is a theme in lean and agile.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we can always measure bugs opened and closed. I'm not sure it's a great metric. I've seen that in the past, because I've seen people closing the bugs that aren't quite closed, or closing them as can't reproduce, only for the bugs to come back again, and that's again, it skews the metrics because you're using bugs.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, again, you want to, it's always good to, I mean, it's, even if you thought that was a great metric, right? I think you should going back at the end of a sprint, or in whatever you do your periodic retro reviews. I mean, having that process where you say, how did the business think we did? Here are our metrics. How do the metrics look? If the metrics look bad, but the business is happy, maybe the metrics aren't telling us anything. If the metrics look good and the business is unhappy, maybe the metrics are telling us the wrong thing.
Yeah.
And, I think all of these are great signals. I think it's, obviously you have to figure out, too many signals, it's, you spend all your time doing the bookkeeping. Like, it's like, it's like the team that has a really elaborate Jira dashboard, and there's somebody who's spending their full time, like, maintaining the Jira dashboard, not like the things on it, but literally the dashboard.
Yeah.
And that's not valuable either.
Yeah. Comes a job in its own right. I mean, and I guess there can also be times where we look at the metrics and they tell us actually we're doing the right thing and we don't need to make any changes. We had a discussion in our team about cycle time, and the upshot was, don't change anything. It looks great. There could be more risk in making a change than there could be in keeping it as is. Everything's consistent. It's nice. We're delivering.
Right. If you're cycle, like, if you're, let's talk about, starting work to merge. If that's like a day, somebody might argue like hourly might be better, but maybe if you did that, then you'd end up skimping on tests, or you'd end up, missing a feedback loop or something. Some teams, more often is better, but if you're on a releasing every couple of days to like a staging environment, or releasing production once a week. I mean, not everyone is doing fully continuous deployment. Trying to ramp it up too quickly is actually, there might be something else you could work, like maybe having better defined product backlog, which can also help, right? Because smaller stories mean it's easier to, well, that's actually another interesting point too. It's not just the engineering practices that affect a metric, it's the things on either side of it. So like, a better planning process might help you. It doesn't mean better mean more elaborate. It could be a more lightweight process that has smaller things. But yeah, so, and on the other hand, and to get certain metrics, you have to figure out if the work is worthwhile. Like, you want to give your stakeholders visibility into where you are, but spending more time updating your issue system is not super valuable.
Becomes a burden. That's right. Yeah. So how important are engineering metrics to achieve your goals?
Oh, working from home, I love it. They are. I mean, like I said, it's hard to, there's like business books on this, right? It's hard. It's hard to fix what you can't measure, but you got to make sure you're measuring the right thing. And like, for example, I give it, like one thing that comes up, for example, is, I've worked in companies where, when we were a small team, we all kind of knew what was going on, very lightweight. We used things like Jira and whatnot to kind of track things at a level. And then they became more tools for reporting around. And then suddenly they become performance evaluation tools. Like, I remember once being, it wasn't me as a manager, being a conversation where managers discussing, this person, their points closed in Jira have gone down.
Yes. And
this is a problem. And then sitting in the room with the person, I realized what's happening is this is a person who's been here longest and they know a bit about everything. So they're actually spending most of their time helping other people. And because Jira has an assignee, it doesn't have a necessarily, I mean, I'm sure you could customize it to do whatever, but
Yeah.
a collaborator field, that's not getting reflected, but you know it from the conversation. So it's a good signal, right? If people seem like unhappy with this person's quality of work and they're not closing Jira tickets, then that could be a conversation, but but yeah, that's like a risk of using your metrics is, what are they measuring? It's not measuring, and it's not measuring what you care about, which is probably the team velocity.
Yes.
Again, I'm using velocity very loosely because velocity is kind of loaded. But like if you're, that would be that was the thing, in this particular case, I looked and said, well, the team is actually getting more done. So if this one person wasn't contributing, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Yes, no, yeah, it goes back around to the bugs. I've seen that used before. Number of bugs closed once, many eons ago. People counting that and talking about it in performance reviews and, like say, tickets closed, and it's an irrelevance really, because it's so easy to game the system.
Well, it also depends on, like, we talk about velocity too, like points and estimation. Like estimation isn't supposed to be that. I mean, if you're doing an agile estimation, it's supposed to be basically, can I get the stuff done? And are the tickets small enough? Like, so it, like, and as you get better, this is another one of those backward feedback things. As you get better, things are easier. So do you just keep adding, like, do you keep the same estimation threshold? Like the whole agile, the canonical, there's different ways of doing it. The canonical estimation about story points is like, you pick your smallest thing and then is it 2 or 3 or 4.
Yeah.
But as you get better, your smallest thing becomes bigger.
Yeah.
As you have tools and frameworks. So maybe it's worthwhile rebasing the system.
Yeah,
right?
well, I think you should calibrate frequently, really. Talk about your points, discuss outliers. While we work Kanban in Pulse, we do use estimation, but it's for the benefit of the developers, really, to talk about the stories, not to look at velocity, because we can't really measure that. There is no sprint.
That's an indicator, right? So if the team says something's an 8, maybe that's too big, whatever an 8 is,
Yeah.
If you think, most of your subs are 3 or 2s or 3s, is that, doesn't mean that it's a badly formed task. It just means you might look at it again. Is this like really atomic enough? Is it too unwieldy?
Yeah. So has it been broken down? Yeah, that's largely how we use it as a. Personally, I'm not such a fan on velocity myself. I like the Kanban style, and I like estimation as a tool for the developers rather than as a tool for the manager to understand what's being done.
I'm on a very small startup. It's a small team, and even within the startup, we're a small team, and within the project I'm working on, it's even a smaller team. So we do some tracking, because we are at a point where there's various levels of stakeholders, and there are people who want to know what we're doing, and it's actually not bad to say what you're doing. But we don't do estimation per se. We mostly say, here are the things we need to do. And sometimes we fall over because the things are too big. And even though we know we can get there, we think we can get there, it is worth spending a little bit of time like splitting it up and saying, well, but we don't count how many tickets we closed. What we count is like, are we, most of our tracking happens at stand up. We're like, I don't think this is going so great, or I think this is going fine. Let me do something else. It's a fine line. Like I feel like people want metrics, but a lot of this stuff, it's very hard. It's not that the numbers are bad. It's very hard to come up with a number that measures what you want.
Yeah.
What you care about.
Yeah. So then, how do you choose your metrics?
Well, again, I think starting with some of the canonical one, like for example, I always have this instinct that time to merge. We're also a distributed team and we're all remote. So, I like to work in small batches. So when I have a pull request that's sitting out for like more than a couple of hours, it's kind of, frustrating sometimes, because I could, do a branch off the branch and put, and daisy chain them so I can actually keep working. Some people I know do that. But on the other hand, I'd rather get this stuff in so other people can work with it. So, and I just looked at there was a period of time where our rate was actually pretty longer than usual. and I felt that validated my instinct. I mean, now it's actually better, and that had nothing to do with a team change. It was more of what we were doing in our various other projects floating around the company, which is actually another thing. Sometimes, as you know, sometimes the metrics point to, like, if the team isn't, say, closing pull requests. I mean, like, I think let me say this in a little more detail. It's not necessarily like, well, you need to, like, okay, well, I can't because I have 3 other tasks, and if I don't do that other thing, and if I stop to do pull requests, I'm going to get yelled at, and that's sort of a cultural thing.
Wow. So is the, I mean, going back to the individual, how do we evaluate the team's performance versus the individual when we're talking about metrics? Should we even consider using metrics for individual developers, or should that be a big no-no, really?
So that goes back to the culture of the team. If you have a very, like, you know, a lot of psychological safety and a very open environment, I think the metrics could be, you know, if everyone agrees on the metrics, they could be. That's the other thing too. I think for individual, well, for team metrics too, buy-in is important, because otherwise people are going to skew them. But on the individual level, I think understanding how they're going to be used so people don't feel like imposed upon, because, you know, that there's lots written about how people skew their behavior to match the metric.
Yeah.
You know, there was a story I read in one book about how they were trying to cut down, because there was some sort of an epidemic going on, and it was tied to rodents. So they were giving a bounty for number of mice caught or something, or number of rats caught. So this one guy actually, and I might be getting the story slightly wrong, but actually was doing great. Turned out he was actually letting rodents out so he could catch them. Because that's what the metric was. It wasn't, you know, but, you know, so if, you know, if there are certain metrics and the team agrees they're good, it's for, you know, that's an indicator for a conversation. But you could say, oh no, that, you know, everything looks like, you know, this is good. Like a classic one that people fight about all the time is test coverage.
Yeah.
And we were on a project where we needed to report test coverage for some compliance reason. And at the time that, you know, I was on a project with them, at the time the coverage was actually pretty not good. So having that metric was a good impetus for the engineering team to do what it wanted to do, because the business was pushing back on, like, they had the theory of, like, testing is, you know, this is another company, by the way, but testing was, you know, a drag.
Yes.
So, but, you know, at a point, you know, and looking at the test coverage numbers, like, you could look at each, you know, I mean, there's all sorts of tools that'll give you, you know, by module, by file, by class, whatever. You could look at it and say, okay, this has like 5%. I probably need to do stuff here. This has 80%. Let me see this. Oh, look, the missing 5% is some system library call that's going to be really hard to mock out, and I know it works. So it's worth the risk to skip it.
Yes.
But getting that extra may or may not be worth it. But, you know, it's an indicator.
Yeah, definitely. Because I mean, I mean, often the case you can have, for example, legacy code that works. You haven't touched it for years, and it might have very low test coverage. And well, it was coded, say, 3-4 years ago. It works in production.
It's very hard to test because it wasn't modular, so you can't use mocking or any of those other things you like to use. And yeah, exactly. It's all like, you know, so meeting an arbitrary number, you know, having a corporate standard say all our tests, our code will have a 95% test coverage. But, you know, but if that legacy code had 5% test coverage, I would still worry and try to write some tests around it.
Sometimes it's not. Sometimes I think it's not even worth it if the code is working and in production. Sometimes it's better pushing to focus on the new code and test the code we work with the most. Where the greatest hotspots are.
Oh no, absolutely. I mean, if you were to touch this legacy code, if you were going to make a change, you looked and said, oh, there's no test coverage. I might want to start writing some tests around the things I might change, or have a smoke test or something just to make sure I wasn't accidentally, you know, breaking something.
Yeah, definitely. So, okay. What about fear around metrics? Do we think we can end up with a culture of blame and fear when we're using metrics as a tool?
I mean, No, metrics are about improvement, right? I mean, using metrics correctly, like if I'm deploying, say Codacy Post and looking at the metrics, or if I'm looking at some of the other tools, dashboards that will give me insight into the code, it's hard to change for the better when you're like doing things out of fear. I mean, at least out of fear, well, I mean, there's two kinds of fear. There's fear that, this is actually a big business problem, and there's like that existential fear about the organization, and that's, but if it becomes like an individual thing or a team thing where, your team if the team isn't meeting the metrics, and they're just arbitrary metrics because somebody like 3 levels up in the org is going to judge them, that's not really going to help, because you're not going to work on solving the business problems. You're going to work on solving, like you said, if your metric is lines of code, you'll write more comments, so you'll write scripts that write up a bunch of like meaningless for loops or something, because if that's how you're evaluated, that's what you might do. I mean, that's kind of absurd, but I think for the lines of code thing, I think that's not historically, I think that's actually been done, because hopefully most of us know lines of code is not a great metric.
I knew a company that did use it many years ago, briefly, and then it was very quickly discredited. We're going back about 25 years. Yeah, wow.
Yeah, but if you keep, but keeping things two and two. I mean, the flip side. So I'm saying like something qualitative is good, but keeping too qualitative, you can just miss things. So I think having, a reasonable set of metrics and always like having that feedback loop is what you want. You don't want to just be, if you've ever worked for someone who, I worked for a company once, and our review process was, we'd sit down with our skip level manager, and you'd basically be told your bonus percentage.
Yeah.
Well, why is that? Well, because of blah, blah, blah. Well, I don't remember actually having goals. So what do I need to do to like make that number bigger? And like, there wasn't really a good answer. So that metric, so that was too qualitative.
Yeah.
But,
yeah. So I think it sounds like it's very important that we, within a company, we align on the metrics from the top to the bottom. For example, if you're going to work with like lead time or cycle time with the team, that the team understands why and what the goals are. Have you got any advice or tips for helping, for example, developers or businesses align on metrics?
I mean, aside from just talking, it's kind of hard to know, but I do think there's a lot an engineering team can do on its own to, like, the engineering team, like the business may not care about cycle time, but, I think the engineering team can look at certain, like, there are some things that are generally good to improve, like I said, within a threshold. Like if your cycle time is days, that's not great. So you want to get that down. Now, when you get to like the smaller numbers, maybe you don't spend the energy to do that, because that becomes hard and just frustrating and not productive. I think there's a number of engineering metrics you could look at if you look at them and in a, what is this helping us find about our process? Again, I think where people go wrong too much, or teams go wrong, actually probably people go wrong, is looking at a number and treating it without any context and without validating that it actually measures what they want to measure.
Yeah, cool. Okay, I've got just one more question here. What about experimentation in innovation in teams? Does that impact the use of metrics? For example, if you want to try out something new on your product, or can we still work with metrics in them cases, or do they not?
I think that's that goes down to the context, right? I mean, again, in the context of say a retrospective, you might get your one of your rituals might be to show the various metrics dashboards, and if you see a big dip or a big spike or something in either a spike in a bad metric or a dip in a good metric, well, why is that? Oh, we also did this. Okay, did we want to do this? Yes, we did. Okay. Did we learn anything useful from that? Okay, is this just and again, if you know anything about team dynamics, is teams do different things and they change things and they regroup how they work, performance will go down. idea of it going up later. So that's the other thing too. Like you want to also then look at trends. Like you can't saying, oh, we did something new this one cycle and like we're never doing anything new again because it busted our metrics.
Yeah.
Not very productive. You know, if we're going 2 months without getting better and we're actually getting continually worse, then that's a sign.
Yeah. Cool.
All right. I think this is a really nice discussion, and I'm sure that we could go on and on, but we have a few interesting questions here in the Q&A. So allow me to ask a few. I'm going to ask the first question by Krishna. Ready? I think you talked about estimation. So should story points estimation be subjective or objective?
I mean, the idea with story points historically was to avoid, well, two things. One of which is a bunch of experts getting into a room and coming up with estimates that weren't based on how the doers were going to do them, and also not to spend like a long time doing it. So that points to more subjective. Having said that, I mean, objective is, well, it's, I'm going to say both, but lightly objective. So like, you know, the best way to do story point estimation, if you are doing story point estimation, is to actually have that, you know, rebasing exercise where you say, here's a bunch of things. What's the smallest one? We all agree this is the smallest one. Now, obviously, every story is a little bit different. Is this twice as hard or 3 times as hard? So doing, but that's still subjective, but at least you're sort of basing it as you have a mental model you're working off of. So I guess strictly speaking, it is subjective, but like having, like checking yourself and like saying, hey, you know, this was a 8 and this was a, you know, 3, or this was a 5 and this was a 3. Is this 5 really about twice as big as that? And again, if you're off once, that's fine. You just check it at the end of sprint and look at your numbers and see how they map. You know, did you hit your goal? But did you hit your goal because your estimates were too high or too low?
Nice, thank you. There's also someone who's part of a small team, and I know you've talked about this, working with small teams in this case. It's a team of 4 developers in a tiny company, and the question is, how do I keep my team engaged in the problem solutioning process? I found that sometimes people are just agreeing to what comes from the design team instead of assessing the actual feasibility.
Oh, wow, this is like the question I think about all the time. I mean, one of the great things about being in a small team in a small company is that you are closer to the product and closer to the customer potentially. So I'd assume actually people who are in that kind of environment want to think more about what they're building. But so the question I have then, and obviously we're not going to do interactive, but the question I have is, when you're getting the, you know, the requirements, the user story, whatever it is, this feature is, this design is implementing, does it include some concept of why and like what the user, I know people don't like this form, but if you ever read the Mike Cohn Agile user story stuff, it's like, you know, the 3 parts, like as a what, I want to, so that, so the who, what, and why. So if you have the why, I mean, I've been in this situation a lot. We're working on something and the design says this, and we all are senior enough engineers, we've seen lots of different designs, and there's something really hard about the design, but when we know the goal, we can come up with something a little bit easier. And obviously you have to loop the design team in because they're also the experts in design. But I mean, I don't know the answer to your specific question, but I mean, the question is like, if you're in a small team in a small company, this is like probably your best opportunity to like really engage in the domain. Whereas being as opposed to being in a big team in a big company where like that can happen, but it's just less likely. And it's fun. True. I think it's fun. I mean, that's why I like small companies.
Yeah, that's true. There's another question here by Andriy Petrenko. I think that's how you say it. How do you deal with estimates when business dictates you a deadline?
Oh, wow. So that goes back to the whole culture aligned goal thing Stuart and I were talking about. I mean, I think I think the estimates. I mean, I think the whole purpose of estimating, particularly an Agile team, is to say, okay, here was the goal, here's our estimate, it doesn't fit, right? And there's 2 things you can do. You can literally lop things off, Well, you could reprioritize a lot of things, or I'm sorry, reprioritize a lot of things off. Or you could say, well, I could do going back to the why, I can do a version of this that's a little bit easier, and I could do a version of this that's a little bit easier. So we could get kind of the core functionality done, kind of the vertical slice through the application, but a little slightly thicker slice. And then we could build the missing features. So I think that's the approach is also when you're building it to maybe build it in a way that, or when you plan to build it in a way that does sort of a kind of vertical slice adding features thing, so that at some point, I mean, I've done this, we built 2/3 of the thing, they're like, oh, we're done, this is good, the business is like, this is exactly what we need. We're like, but we had this really cool feature you wanted, and we wanted, no, sorry, we don't. So
yeah, no, I agree. It's to look for, we tend to look for the items that have less value, but are maybe a high cost to implement, and try and put them into a maybe bucket.
Yeah.
Like you say, you end up with this must and these maybes. They're lower value, they're hard work, but we've got the critical infrastructure in place, and we squeeze that into the deadline.
But also getting things like out in front of a stakeholder or customer. So like this is a whole vertical slices thing, like it's there's this traditional idea where you build like the database layer, the infrastructure layer, then you build the UI. I mean, people don't really do this, but like instead of doing that, saying, well, we need this feature, and it has this UI component and this backend component and this mobile component. Can we just build that feature in a minimal way so that people can see it? And the other thing too is, I mean, there are some awesome designers and awesome business people and product people, but humans as a whole have a really hard time especially with a new thing, conceptualizing what they need. They have a vision of what they want, but sometimes they can get by with something less or different. They when they see it, they're like, this is exactly what I wanted. Or sometimes the thing they wanted isn't anything at all they were thinking about. It might be something an engineer thought, hey, this was easy to do. Do you want to take a look at this?
Yeah, thanks for answering this, both of you. We have a few more questions. I think people are very interested to know a few things. So I think Christian is asking if there are metrics for managers themselves that the team or company should care about. How do you see this? Is there such a thing?
I mean, so this is obviously a little bit outside of the whole metrics tooling thing, but I think they're more fun. I mean, you could do games with calendaring. I mean, there's things like, I think Jürgen Appello has some stuff about managing for happiness. So there's like happiness metric type things. And actually that I do recommend glancing at that book. I mean, it may not be like exactly what you want, but it talks about team happiness. So there are things managers can do to facilitate that. Number of one-on-ones they do, or how often they spend on one-on-ones. And, maybe even within the one-on-ones, you can measure things like how much time they talk versus listen. Of course, gathering that metric could be a little tricky. But I do know people who've done meetings, not with one-on-ones, but have been the thing where there's someone in the room counting like how many times different people talk and discovering that certain people are dominating the conversation. But, I mean, from the people management perspective, I think those are things that matter. I mean, there's also, if the manager is also an engineer and building things, a hands-on manager, obviously you have to fit that in. You could also, I guess, measure the manager based on how the team does, but again, by what? That's a harder one to figure out, like lines of code. Stuart's team, we did the most lines of code of everyone, so Stuart should get a promotion. Yes.
Yeah, thanks for that. Here's an interesting one also. Nine is asking, how does technical debt impact in engineering performance, and how should we deal with that?
A technical debt's an interesting one because the words mean so many different things to different people. I mean, in the traditional, I guess in the original definition, technical debt, like people use technical debt for we didn't have any time, we just slapped something together, right? Whereas I think the traditional meaning was we are making a conscious decision to not refactor this code, or to use a simpler schema or something like that, and we know we need to fix it later. So, I mean, I guess that ties into the business goal, right? Like if, you don't want to be so perfect that you actually miss your product window, but you also have to make sure you have time, you make time to fix it. So, I mean, to that, so I guess, technical debt will, if you don't address it, technical debt will slow some things down, but, I think you need to just make it a point to fix it. If it's actual technical debt, the metaphor being like a mortgage versus like a credit card, right? Like making us not testing is like credit card debt, and writing a limited test with, or designing your code for testability, but maybe not writing all the tests because you didn't have time. That might be more of a mortgage debt where it's actually getting you somewhere and you can actually pay it down later.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. It's that eternal balance,
Yeah,
right?
so a lot of these questions, of course, are so situation specific, right? So it's hard to just generally.
Yeah. I'm not sure if this one's also specific, but another person, Sam Oliveira, is asking, how would you level different individuals working on completely unrelated projects? So would it be viable to have a standard generic set of metrics to serve as a starting point to measure productivity?
So this is kind of tricky. Like metrics for people is always tricky. And the also thing is, what are levels? Like traditionally higher level people are more collaborative. That's typically the metric, the thing I've seen. I mean, though they're also very high level. So depending on whether you're talking about higher level collaborator, force multiplier person, in which case it's really hard to find the right metric. I don't know of a good metric for that. I mean, that's more of a heuristic. I mean, there's things you can look at around the team, the person. I'm going to punt on this one actually, because I honestly think using metrics for individuals, just metrics, is kind of hard. I think what you want to measure is impact on the team, and I think you could look at each team and say, how are they doing, and then have conversations and figure out like why. If Mary is if the team Mary is on is doing a lot better, and like, oh yeah, Mary helped me with this, Mary helped me with that, and Mary solved this hard problem, that might be an indication, but it's not definitive, and and it also depends on the team dynamics. Some teams are more collaborative, some teams are less collaborative, so it's harder to be that force multiplier. So I'm going to punt on that one, because it's very hard to talk about metrics and individuals without a lot of context.
Yeah, there's also something related to this. So when we're speaking about working on completely different projects, another person is asking, how do you measure efficiency and ensure a good process when your team is working on multiple projects or pieces of work at a time?
I mean, see if Stuart has an opinion about this. I think a lot of it has to do with are each of the stakeholders for each of the projects happy? Because I mean, it's always a trade-off, right? If you're doing, it also depends how different the projects are, right? If you're doing multiple features within one application that are very closely related, that's that's kind of easier. If you're switching between, say you're a front-end developer and you're switching between three different applications that are just three different applications, this context switching has a high cost. I'm not going to say don't do it, because multitasking is, or at least context switching is real. I think Jürgen Appel was also like, that's his current rant. So I'm not going to say don't do it, but you want to definitely understand why you're doing it and realize it has a cost, and figure out how it is, if there's a way you can do it better, or maybe do a little less of it, because too much context switching means you're always context switching and not working.
And do you think that impacts the metrics a great deal with context switching a lot? I mean, with Impulse, we sometimes have multiple streams of work, but they can be quite closely aligned. But metrics wise, we may, we would gather metrics for the team as a whole rather than for each stream of work.
I think that works. I mean, especially if the work is close. And like, honestly, sometimes having something different is like, I always see my boss and I were talking about how I tend to different work styles. I like to have, like, I have my product work, and then I'm lazy, so I like to automate things. So I always have like a background tool type thing, which does serve a team goal.
Yeah.
But it's the thing I do where I'm like, I'm hitting a wall with this. I need to, rather than spending time just staring at the screen and not solving a problem, I'm building this tool. So like, it's actually productive work, though, in the sense that at the end of like 3 weeks, I've gotten this much done as opposed to this much if I was just staring at the screen, banging my head against the wall, which is mixing a metaphor. But but yeah, I think if you're doing big context switches, I think that's very hard to. I think even if the team is doing big context switches, I can't imagine that the metrics are going to be stable because like you have to get your head around it. You have to like remember how do I do this? How do I set up this code base? How do I set up my IDE?
Okay, thank you. There's a few more. So okay, here's one. Let me just pick one. We have so many. For me, an engineering team can't operate or be productive if they don't feel secure that they won't be punished for outages, bugs, misestimated deadlines. So how would you suggest making the case for investing in a safer culture to an executive team?
Oh, wow. That's both a wonderful question and a very hard one. Do you have any thoughts? You have a thought, Stuart.
Oh, I feel like we should work that way anyway. Bugs happen. Even the best developers put bugs in. We shouldn't blame people for putting bugs in. Sometimes we can end up forcing them to put bugs in by putting too much pressure on people to get work done. So how do you make the case?
I mean, there are books written about this too. I mean, there is a big tenet in Agile that you need to, or actually, I mean, I think if you Googled for like Agile and failure or something, it's hard to be Agile if you can't make, because if you innovate, you're going to fail. Like if you search for like innovation and failure, there's like many books written about this. I guess the thing is, I mean, much like Stuart had his special guests come by briefly, I'll just talk about parenting. Like, with your kids, you want, my philosophy when as a parent of a now teenager is, when he was little, it's like I would let him make mistakes and possibly do things that might be a little bit risky, but they had to be like a measured risk. Like, if so, I think, maybe coming at it that way and saying, we need to have our teams be able to, I mean, outages are tricky because lots of things can cause outages, but, if the reason you're having outages is because you don't have infrastructure to protect the outages, don't stop the people from making changes, invest in the infrastructure. But, letting people do like small failures, like not letting people, making it safe to do small failures, generally is a win because, you try 3 things, 2 of them are going to fail and the third one's going to be a big win. And you'll learn from the other 2, hopefully. The other thing is if you punish failure, you don't get to talk about the failure. People don't want to talk about it. And in my life, I think both personal and professional, that I've learned the most from things that didn't work.
Yeah. I agree. That's what I teach my little boy, actually, to try stuff. And if it doesn't work, think about it because you'll learn how to make it work.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And if, like say, riding a bike or something, if you fall down, as long as it's like not unlike,
yeah,
a flaming course with like spikes or something, if it's like on grass or something, like you'll be fine. You'll figure it out. You'll hurt a little bit, but you understand like what happened.
But I was going to say, I wonder if in making a case, you could talk about innovation, finding the solutions, and maybe a more productive environment. I think where people feel safe, they're more inclined to work harder and try harder, and take risks. And I don't mean bad risks. I mean risks in such a way that they will put themselves forward for a new task and they themselves will grow, and that will make the team more productive over time. So, and
also having the conversation, like, what can go wrong if I do this? What's the worst thing that can happen? And then, and figuring out what the level of acceptable risk is, because there's a lot of things you do. Like, there's nothing you can do that's going to not break something.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it also could be like, if you're breaking production, you probably are missing testing somewhere. So maybe that's actually more almost, I mean, maybe the first, I don't know, so many levels of this. Read a book on psychological safety, read a book on innovation, pitch it to your managers, but also argue for like more root cause analysis stuff. The root cause isn't that Bill committed the bug. The root cause is that there was no tooling to catch this error, because that commit on its own looked perfectly fine.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Nice, thank you. Another question is, how can we keep balance regarding sprint tickets and tasks so that you can complete technical tasks and still keep stakeholders happy?
I actually wrote a blog post about this a long time ago. I'm actually a believer. I honestly don't like the idea of technical tasks as like technical tasks. I feel like you should be able to tie, even if it is purely a technical task, like we need to, upgrade the database or something, and that's maybe a bigger one. But I think you should be able to tie it to stakeholder value. Like you need to write, like there might be something that's, I mean, I don't think testing should be a work item of itself, but like, for example, we were developing an integration test framework, which is net new work, right? It wasn't just, it was like we had to like work with hops and so that was actually a bit of a project, right? So, I mean, that's a technical thing, but why are we doing it? We're doing it so that we can deploy quicker. And this is the business. So I actually try to pitch. So first of all, like try to put technical work as sort of a part of your other work that touches that same code. But if it really is a big standalone thing, I'd pitch it as, this is the value to the business. And if you can't do that, maybe you shouldn't be doing it. And for like the other things, if you can say this ticket, I mean, I'm going to use points, and forgive me if you don't like points, adding, there's this code is really complex. When we do this, we're going to refactor it somewhat to make it cleaner, easier to maintain, and less bug free, but have fewer bugs. If that bumps a ticket from a 3 to a 5, and the product owner is complaining about that, push back a little bit. Because what's going to happen is you're going to have a production outage in 2 weeks, and that's going to be more than a 5-point ticket. Or more than a 2-point difference, rather. Yeah.
Good point. Thank you. There are two related questions here. I think they're more management questions, which is about rewarding effort versus outcomes. And another person's also asking if these engineering objectives should be tied to monetary incentives, for example, like yearly bonuses. From your experience, what do you think?
I'm gonna do the second one first, and I'm honestly, this is not probably the most mainstream answer. I tend to think that I think they're inputs, but I don't think they're by themselves, because there's many reasons the numbers can be how they are in terms of bonuses, and in terms of outcomes versus effort. This goes back to the fear of failure thing. Depends what kind of effort. Somebody working 80-hour weeks, gee, they work really hard. We should, where everyone else is getting the same amount of work done in 40, that's probably like that kind of effort. I don't think is a sign of like someone needing deserving a bonus. That just sets the culture wrong too. Like, even if they got a little bit more work done, like, is that the culture you want? But in terms of outcome effort versus, but on the other hand, like, trying a bunch of innovative things and like half of them didn't work, that could be, but again, it all has to be a conversation, right? If you just look, if someone is trying a bunch of stuff and breaking stuff, and like that, they're not getting like their backlog work done, that's not good. But if as part of their backlog work, they're also doing these other things, that's probably a good thing. But again, if they're doing more innovative work, they may not be meeting their outcomes, but or they're solving harder problems. They may not be getting them all done, but they are like persevering and making progress. That's a lot of words for saying it really depends on the context. That's Stuart. I don't know if you have a similar thought.
Yeah, I think it's really difficult to answer. I agree. Depends on the context. Like I say, that you can put a lot of effort in, but equally rewarding outcomes doesn't. Not everyone has positive outcomes through 1 year, and they may have better outcomes the next year. there's a lot of context. Yeah.
I mean, I think effort, by effort, you mean like being willing to engage and try things, which is a little bit different than effort. I think that's good. I mean, I think that's definitely a good thing. Assuming they're getting a baseline set of their goals done.
Yeah. But I mean, with the other, I don't think I'd like to monetize metrics in any way, even for the team. You know, oh, you hit a lead time of X many days, we'll give you a bonus.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's an input. You could sort of say, well, you know, gee, it looks like they might be doing better. Let me sanity check that with the business stakeholders and everyone else. Because your lead time could be better, but you're not delivering any more features.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Let's get to another question, because we have a few different questions now. So how would you compare the usefulness of hard metrics like story points, number of tickets, etc., compared to soft metrics like surveys, reviews, satisfaction? Is one type more important?
I think they need to be correlated and work together because, you know, as we said earlier, I think, and we could argue about story points being a hard metric or not, but, you know, or number of tickets being a hard metric, and, you know, we can sort of say, you know, put them all in front of you and see if you see any patterns. If we're closing more tickets, which are like, you know, number of tickets and story points, for example, are maybe related, like, are we overestimating, underestimating? Surveys are actually, so I actually worked on a team where there was this weird management dynamic that evolved as the team grew. And we actually started doing like a happiness metric type of thing where we said, how happy are you with like your work, the way the team works, the way the company works, or the way the larger engineering organization works? And it was very interesting in that the local team stuff is generally pretty good. The larger company stuff is generally pretty poor. And over time, we addressed the things to make the team stuff a little bit better, and also the things for the outside facing stuff a little bit better. So that was actually really useful. Obviously, like the number 8 didn't help us. It was like, we got the number and then we had an open conversation in a trusting environment, which is also maybe sometimes we might have had to do, we could have done some anonymous input too. So why did you rate it? Why did you give it a 3 as opposed to a 10? Or what things could we do to fix this? Performance reviews are always like, there's so much written about performance reviews and how they're done badly. I mean, performance reviews, I think annual performance reviews are stupid, I think, because honestly, you just need to be, if you're either meeting with your manager on a regular basis, you have the feedback, or you're not. And so like nothing magic's going to happen at the end of the year. And like, I think many of us have been in a situation where the goals you get in January or so, the company has changed direction so many times that the goals you get in January are totally irrelevant. So even if you met all your goals, you would not be doing your job. Right. So, but I mean, I think it's all about conversations. I think metrics are great inputs. I like to, and I don't know how much this will carry, but like my community, like standardized testing for kids is a big fraught topic. And I think it's because the tests came in to measure, like they're good for certain things like measuring, like, for example, they did the test results before the COVID pandemic and after to show, and they did show like there were certain drops as a group. But the tests are really bad for like individual kids because there's so many factors in test taking that don't reflect kids' actual performance in the classroom. So like, making sure the metrics tell you what you want, but also like having a conversation about them, because none of these metrics I don't think there's, well, I mean, maybe Stuart's team is working on it, but I don't think there's one metric that says your team will be successful.
Not yet. If we can discover it.
Thank you. Cool. I think someone else has a question in the audience. Will, would you be able to write in the chat more or less what you'd like to talk about? And maybe if you ask us in the chat, we can help you. In the meantime, we have maybe time for 1 or 2 more questions. And thank you all so much for sending your wonderful questions. We're running out of time, but I guess I'm gonna have to pick one last question, which is, So speaking from experience, could you talk a bit more about ways and systems of creating or using values of story points?
I mean, I think we covered this a little bit earlier, using values of story points. I mean, in terms of how do you estimate, I mean, I think, there's a lot written about this, the canonical, like, you sit down as a team and you figure out, so I think a lot of people do story points badly in that they get in the room and they say, okay, everyone estimate. And everyone has a totally different context. Whereas that's a great cat. I think to do it right, you really need to do the exercise as a team, and you have to do this when you get new team members and change a team of like, let's agree, like what's a 1, what's a 3. And then, I mean, it doesn't have to be, but just so you get in your heads, you don't have to be totally precise, but so many times I've been in a place where like the team composition has changed so much and you're arguing about a 3 or a 5 and you talk about what it is, but which actually brings me to how I like to use story points when I do use them. I actually think it's less about the number. I think it's more about the conversation. Like if I say something's a 2 and Stuart says 8, right? Well, listen, if I say it's a 2 and Stuart says a 3, it's a 3, who cares, right? I say it's a 2, Stuart says an 8, we want to talk about it. Stuart's like, well, I say, well, no, I just have to do this, this, this. You're like, well, you forgot about is that our Postgres migrations don't work and we need to do it this way. And then I can say, well, no, we don't need Postgres. We could use this other, like that conversation to converge on an implementation, like to converge on a mental model. You're muted.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I agree. I like them as a tool for the actual engineer themselves rather than the manager or the business to have that conversation. You, like you say, you have 4 or 5 people and one is an outlier. So you talk about the ticket together, you talk about the work that needs doing. And then when that work actually gets into a sprint or on the Kanban board, the people who pick it up have a better idea of what the work is. They have a better idea of the complexity and they can make a better choice on what they're working on.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, we like to measure, complexity with it. So rather than a time value or anything like that, just straight complexity of the task.
Yeah, I mean, and also like so many, if you're doing like you use a story which has that level of doesn't have that great level of precision, which is perfectly appropriate. There's complex ways to do some things and more or less complex ways to do something, and they each add slightly different value. So having that, that's the value of story points.
Yeah.
And as we talked, and also as you get better, you're going to get more productive. So like, what do? Do you recalibrate, or your point values get bigger? So, theoretically your velocity may or may not increase over time, depending on what you do with your points.
Thank you, Steve and Stuart. We have a very interactive audience today. We can wrap up the Q&A. Thank you all so much for your questions, and special thanks also to our speakers for answering them so wonderfully. Even if we couldn't get to every question in the time that we have, we always write a blog post after each webinar where you can check out the answer. And yeah, you can also reach out to Steve or Stuart directly on LinkedIn or Twitter. They are tagged in our posts if you visit Codacy's page. But yeah, anyway, thank you so much for sharing so much of your experience and perspectives today. And yeah, don't worry, this recording will be shared with everyone to your email to look back if you missed anything. And if you want to stay tuned for more of our live talks, you just make sure to follow Codacy on Twitter and LinkedIn. Yeah, but we can sign off. And thank you, everyone, and hope to see you at the next live talk. Thanks, Steve and Stuart.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.